What's up, guys? This is Bryce Van Hoosen, and today on this episode of My Guitar Mods, we're going to talk about this Jackson 2015 RRXT. Alright, so up this week is a 2015 X-Series Jackson Randy Rhoads model with a hardtail string-through body and tune-o-matic bridge. This is another guitar that my beautiful wife Mako purchased for me. She got this for me for Christmas of 2016. So I've had it for a number of years. It was a previous year model that she bought for kind of a discounted price on Sweetwater. I love you, honey. She also bought the last one for me as well. So this is two of a number of guitars that my wife has actually purchased for me. So yeah, she got this delivered sometime around Christmas in 2016, and I know she went to all the trouble to kind of haul this thing inside, put it upstairs, because the box that it comes in is kind of big. It didn't come with a case or anything, so they have to pack it in whatever sort of nice preserving way that they can. And yeah, she stashed this thing in our little 3-bedroom house in our bedroom, actually, just kind of behind some stuff. And I had no idea until on Christmas she said, okay, I actually have one other thing for you. Here it is. So I was delighted. Honestly, I haven't made a whole lot of changes to this particular guitar, mostly because with the addition of the tune-o-matic bridge and string through, there's not really anything to do there. It's not like a cheap Floyd where you can just start swapping parts at will. Floyds are a lot of fun because you can tweak things, so if you're somebody who really likes modding your guitars, Floyd Rose are kind of a dream. But with the stop tail piece and the fact that the one that it came with is either a Godot or a Tone Pros or something like that, there's not really much that I can do to improve that and make it better. So primarily what we're talking about here is electronics upgrades and tuning machines and kind of some alterations that I had to make in doing that. So first off, let's kind of talk about the Jackson X-Series. I get a lot of questions asking me what I think of the Jackson X-Series. Are they cheap guitars? Are they okay? Are they worth the money? Do they compare to the Pro Series? Do they compare to a USA? Do they compare to Japanese ones? And the short answer is that the X-Series are kind of their own thing. Definitely feel different than any of the previous Japanese guitars that I've had, or the modern Pro Series, which are also made in Indonesia. The X-Series, they usually feature, I want to say, kind of more budget woods, and maybe not necessarily construction, but budget woods, budget hardware, budget electronics and pickups, that sort of thing. So with this one, basically what you're getting is a basswood body, as opposed to on the Pro Series they use either alder or ash or mahogany a lot of times, so you get kind of a more premium wood, but this one is basswood, so the wings are basswood. The neck, it's still a neck-through design, which is kind of amazing that it was at the price point that it was at, because it's definitely one of the more affordable neck-through models. And the neck itself is maple neck-through. As for the exact species and quality of maple, I don't necessarily know that information. It's just maple, and we'll leave it at that. Oh, and a rosewood fretboard with standard nickel jumbo frets and the kind of pearloid inlays. Of course, with some of the nicer models, you're going to get either an ebony fretboard or mother of pearl inlays. But that's all just cosmetic stuff, really. Insofar as setup and playability, when I got this right out of the box, honestly, it's an amazing guitar for the money. It plays wonderfully. It's really one of the better sounding guitars I think that I have. There's something about it, whether it's the string through construction or the fact that it's just a stop tail piece with no locking nut or whatever. It's a great guitar, and I really enjoy using it recording, say, rhythm tracks or something like that. The intonation was really good right out of the gates. I don't know if Sweetwater necessarily does some additional kind of setup or whatever, but if you're looking for a guitar, I highly recommend getting it from Sweetwater, because those guys, they go the distance for sure. That being said, I mean, I think playability of the X-Series is wonderful. It's top notch. I don't really experience any sort of playability downsides. Some of the construction stuff was a little bit, it could be kind of touch and go, especially when you're looking at, you know, things like, you know, the binding and the way that that was done. There are some kind of bubbles on the finish that won't necessarily come out, you know, like this thing here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's this little imperfection. And that's kind of the stuff that you can expect to get from the X-Series. It doesn't necessarily make it a bad guitar by any means, but let's not kid ourselves, it's not going to be a USA Jackson. But if you're wondering, you know, should I get an X-Series? Will I enjoy it? I think you should. If it's something that is in your price range, then yeah, you definitely should, and you can make some modifications to the electronics and some of the hardware. If it's an X-Series with the Floyd Rose, I definitely recommend using paying the $200 to swap the Floyd Rose Special or whatever they come with an actual German-made Floyd Rose original. I think that's going to save you a lot of headaches and tuning problems in the future. Originally, it came with these Duncan design pickups, which are like a licensed version of a Seymour Duncan pickup. So essentially, they take the Seymour Duncan construction, ceramic magnet, this amount of windings, etc., and they send it over to a factory overseas, wherever, and they make these pickups at just cheaper prices. I actually used this on a tour with my old dad Spellcaster in 2017, and the Duncan design pickups were they left a lot to be desired. I would definitely recommend swapping those out if you can. They had this kind of really sort of piercing top end bite to them, and it would just feed back kind of uncontrollably. So first order of business was to get some new pickups. And I went with the new, which EMG had just released kind of at the time, the retroactive Fat 55 set, which is kind of my go-to for retroactive pickups. If I'm not using, say, like a 5766 or a Hetfield set, I'm definitely using the Fat 55. So if you see me with any of these kind of open coil looking pickups, they are usually EMG retroactive Fat 55s. I love them. They sound kind of like an active PAF, and they have this mid-range bite that's really just awesome. It's incredible. I did a couple videos for the bridge and the neck individually, so you can check those out further back on my YouTube channel, and I'll link to that in the description below as well. Yeah, so EMG retroactive Fat 55 pickups. I swapped out all of the electronics for EMG solderless connectors. I've never had a problem with any of the EMG solderless stuff, just as an FYI. None of it has ever come undone on tour or anything like that, so the EMG solderless stuff is super easy to do, and it's pretty rock solid if you ask me. So we have two master volumes here. This one here controls the bridge pickup, this one here controls the neck pickup. EMG three-way solderless switch, and actually an RPC control down here instead of a tone. So you increase that and you get kind of a, I don't want to say like a single coil, but it's more like a single coil vibe where it sort of cuts the bass and boosts the highs without necessarily cutting the mids or whatever. So you just roll that on or off depending on how much of that you want. The pickup rings that came originally were plastic pickup rings. I swapped those out with some metal pickup rings that you can get on Stu Mac. Those are great. I don't know if they add to any sort of tonal qualities. Some people say that having the ring actually held in place on the body in metal makes something sound better. I don't know. Your mileage may vary. I definitely think the metal rings look much cooler than the plastic ones, so I'm gonna go for that if I can always make that work. One thing that I actually really enjoyed about the X-Series, and especially for this RR and what kind of came stock with it, is this pickguard is actually just brushed metal, as is this little string through body area as well. They could have easily done something that was plastic, and I think I might have seen that before on some of the older made in Japan models or some of the more entry-level JS ones, but it's actually metal, so it looks really nice and really helps the overall aesthetic of the guitar, and that's a nice little touch there. One thing that I did have to do is, because the EMG solderless volume and tone knobs, because the part underneath that actually all of the quick connects connect to, because they're slightly bigger than the stock import volume pots that came with this guitar, I had to actually take a Dremel and just route a little bit more space out here. So I actually took some wood out of the control cavity of the guitar. Also helped to fit the battery, because if you've ever worked with any of these RR models that have the controls are going through the front, or the control panel is accessed through the front, there's not a lot of space in there, so it really helps to have a Dremel or something. And that might be something that you need to kind of prepare for, to have a drill or a Dremel or something like that whenever you're making these kind of modifications to your guitar. So moving on, again, like I said, a lot of everything on this is stock. I mean, there's not a whole lot that you can change. I mean, I guess I could change the nut. That might be the next area of business, but it's stock for now. The other part that I changed were the machine heads. So again, putting in some locking tuning machine heads. These are the Planet Waves. The Planet Waves locking tuners, the trim lock ones. So you put them in and they kind of auto cut themselves. It's real nice and the ultimate in laziness. One problem that I ran into with this particular guitar is that the stock machine heads were sitting in here kind of funky because the back of the headstock was actually sort of a little bit wonky feeling, and whoever drilled the initial machine heads in kind of did an odd job. So they weren't necessarily sitting in here evenly. That made it hard to swap it out with my usual go-to machine heads, the Goto ones, because of the fact that this headstock was a little bit thicker and some of the bolt pattern for the screws didn't necessarily line up, so I couldn't actually get a string through there. I couldn't get it to actually fit. So if you're running into that issue with some of these Jackson, the thickness of the Jackson headstock. The Planet Waves ones are a little bit longer. They don't have the dual sizes, so everything's the same size. Basically, you can get a little bit more through the actual headstock without worrying about it not being, you know, long enough to fit through the other side. One big change that I made to this guitar is the headstock was still a little bit too thick to actually fit the Planet Waves tuners in. So I took a Dremel and I literally shaved the top part of this down and then kind of refinished it with some white paint that we had around the house very badly. Actually kind of a little bit embarrassed about the job that I did, but I got these tuners in. So I Dremeled it and then sanded it down even, and the tuners went in and they lock down and bolt in and all that kind of good stuff. So you go to lengths for some of this stuff for the spirits of modifying your guitar. You might have to remove a little bit of wood. So I'm halfway paranoid that this is gonna get into the hands of the wrong person and they're going to look at this and be like, oh my god, what did this asshole do to this guitar? Because it's really not pretty. Maybe somebody will eventually just refinish the back of this headstock at some particular point in the future, but until then, honestly, no reason. It's just slightly cosmetic. There you have it. Other than that, this guitar is rock solid. I love playing it. And if you're wondering if you should get a Jackson X-Series guitar, I definitely think you should. Just beware that you might have to make some alterations if, you know, you're planning on modding it. Other than that, it's a beautiful, beautiful guitar. Alright, cool. That's all I got for you guys today. Next week we'll talk about the snakeskin Charvel Jackson dinky mutt guitar that I have that is a lot of people's favorites to look at when I post on Instagram. So if you like this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, and feel free to share and like and subscribe. Alright. I'm Bryce Van Hoosen. I'll see you next week.